So we'll call to order our Catamount Community Forest Committee at 5:32 on June 13th. And first is public comment. Do we have any public to comment? As Alan joins us. Does everybody know Alan?
Yeah, today I'm representing Catamount tonight. John could not be here.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, make room for you.
All right.
Yeah. Any public comment? I think no. No. Okay. Good. Look, we caught back up. We're 3 minutes ahead of time. Now we need to approve the minutes from May 9th. We usually scroll through them on the board.
So I guess I'd just like to make a comment. They were long. It's a lot of them. And I think if anybody really wanted to get the full scope of the last month's meeting, we really have to watch the Zoom recording. Yeah, you did a good job, but there was so much more that was going on because that was a lot of stuff to cover.
If you scroll up, there was just a sentence that
I'm sorry, down.
yeah, scroll along. I don't remember. I should have remembered the number. It was a ways in stuff. It was something where it was Andrew said something about the town, and then it just kind of.
There's 2, 4, 5, and 4, 6 mention Andrew.
Do a control F there.
And it was.
Or Andrew asked.
Those numbers are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was Simon started that a while ago. That was pretty good.
The rest you can look at it. No, it'll be in here.
We'll have privacy committee to review.
Was there was something that you saw that you were looking for?
4.2.
Okay.
That middle sentence there. He's the third sentence. He said that is sort of like saying the town.
Oh.
Don't.
Okay. I didn't see that.
He said.
If I remember correctly, I think his intent was to say that the land owning the easement is the same as the town owning the easement.
Saying the town. Okay.
You clarified. Let's just say.
On the easement, okay, for the land. The easement, got it.
It's actually what you and I discussed the other day about the easements, possible easements.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yes.
For the access to the other side.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the amendment as just shown.
And I guess I'll second it because I was the only one that was there.
Oh, thanks. I never know as chair if I'm supposed to like first or second, I think, but that'll be a moot point once we get to our next agenda item. So all in favor of approving the minutes?
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Opposed? Yeah, okay, so we're past.
What's that?
You were
there.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it was, yes.
Yeah, good.
So our next agenda item is nominate, elect chair, vice chair, and treasurer.
Treasurer?
Yeah, what's for treasurer? There's no. I
Is
mean,
there no treasurer?
There
We
is,
haven't had one.
We have
Simon,
previously?
Simon basically took care of
Okay,
the,
then we can scratch that off.
yeah, the numbers.
I'm thinking in WCC, I think when I wrote that.
So I would say thank you, when last year we had this, I said, well, may I have a turn to be chair, so I think Terry was also at the time previously chair, and I said, oh, can I do a turn? So thank you that I could do my turn as chair. I'm not interested in doing it again, not that I don't want to, but I think it's nice for everybody to get a turn. That wants it, so, that was my comment. So who would like to nominate them? Can you nominate yourself?
Do you want me to explain?
Oh, yeah, tell us the process.
Yeah, so it's Robert's rules. Basically, we'll have a time for members of the committee to nominate. And you can either nominate yourself or you can nominate someone else. Everyone makes their nominations and then you'll basically close nominations and then
Okay.
we'll vote. And so we can do nominations and then we can talk about voting.
Okay. And if we get 3 nominations, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. How to vote.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do an Australian ballot or Robert's ballot. That.
And if you get no nominations, then.
Right.
Then you're permanently the chair.
No. That's how it is with outdoor
Wherever
family-
sitting it has to stay
That's
there.
outdoor family center board. I'm like, I don't need to be president anymore. Like, I don't. Yes, who would like to nominate?
I wanted to nominate
Yourselves.
Reed, but Reed doesn't want it. I would like to nominate Reed.
So I should add one more thing.
And you can nominate.
When you
me.
make a nomination, that person can either accept or decline the nomination.
Oh, very nice.
Yes.
So you should nominate him and make him decline.
Well, no, I'm gonna let him do that.
Because I'm chair of the energy committee,
Ah,
and I have been for over 2 years, and we're coming up on this, but our voting isn't until at least 2 weeks from now at our next meeting, and maybe in early July. I don't know if anybody else wants to take it over. I would like somebody else to take it over, but there has been reluctance in the first 2 years of the committee, had anybody else to want to be the chair. They have been vice chairs, but not chair, unless you can go home and convince Kevin to become chair, because he's vice chair now.
All right.
I would prefer not being chair of 2 committees. There is a fair amount of work to do,
mhm.
so I will respectfully decline.
To prime the pump, I'd be happy to do vice chair. If no, I'll nominate myself for vice chair. Do I? Or how does it work? Do you just nominate yourself for something and then you pick, or what?
Yeah, you.
That's okay, I think, yeah.
Okay, because I
So
said I
I-
didn't want to do chair again, but I'm willing to serve. I mean, it's just service,
Right.
right? You know, you have to pay attention to Andrew when he emails you with the agenda and reply to
Right.
him. And then you have to like run the meeting when you're here. Other than that, it's not much, if anything. Is it?
You can or can't be.
Yeah.
It's up to you. It's
Yeah,
up to the
depends
person.
on-
Yeah.
My
Right.
experiences have been, on energy has been quite a bit working with staff member on a weekly basis, planning things, getting things going, dealing with outside organizations. Not that other members don't either, but to bring things together and have an effective agenda. Have you found that this one's not as strenuous?
I mean, I talked to Andrew, once and Simon, once in a while. And then with the agenda and running the meeting. I mean, I think we have a good group of like committee members, right? So like you guys initiate the invasives, Terry, like, I mean,
Mhm, yeah, I've had this since
yeah.
for a while, yeah.
So I mean, I think we have got like a really good committee. Everybody takes initiative. Reed, I don't know if that makes it easier for the chair.
I can, how about, I can nominate myself for the chair. I haven't done it yet. The energy committee, it meets twice a month, and this only meets once a month, so I think that the energy, not the energy load, but the load is different. But I also am like this, I miss some of the meetings, so somebody will have to. I'm not able to attend all of the meetings because of the schedule.
Yeah, that's how the vice works. So if you're, I would imagine if you miss a third or so, or half of the meetings, the vice chair just has to do it. which is not fun.
We'd like to have as much attendance throughout the board
Mhm.
as we can.
Yeah, everybody should come every week. Or every.
So what happens now? So
We got
you're,
single,
Danielle's gonna be the chair. And you're.
Well,
gonna
we
be
have
vice
to, I have to
chair.
decide, if does anybody else like to nominate? I understood I'm supposed to draw nominations to a close. Are there any other nominations that would like to be voiced now? In which case I would draw nominations to a close. And we have one person nominated for chair and one person nominated for vice chair. Now. Now what do we do? Do we vote on
I
that?
think a verbal vote is appropriate with one nomination for each.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
can just vote like you would for any motion.
Yeah.
okay. So let's do a vote. We'll say all in favor of that kind of voting. Danielle for chair and me for vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
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 Should just,
Oh, I can't vote.
no, you should just also add the term.
Oh,
Just say.
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1 year term. Yes, this is.
We need a
1 year
term limit on this.
Yes.
Perpetuity.
And Danielle, you didn't vote. Was that intentional?
You can vote for yourself.
Okay, then I'm sure.
Can you say yes?
Yes.
Okay, all opposed, there's nobody left. And Jean, you don't vote?
I was.
Oh, you did vote, okay, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Then. We're past, that's the plan, right?
Can
What
you
else we-
combine those two?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay. Is
Yes.
that,
It seems
everybody's okay
wonderful.
with that?
Yep.
Great.
Done.
I tried to be efficient.
All right, now we're
Thank you
ahead of
for the
schedule.
Formality.
I do, I'm sorry, but Jean, I have to say, you always will be the voice of Champlain Valley School Team.
I know, that's okay. If I don't want to be at a meeting, I'll just call a snow day.
That's awesome.
Maybe, can you make it snow more for us?
Not right now.
Cottonwood.
I'll work on it in November.
Okay. Beautiful, so now let's go to the bird box maintenance
You
memo.
get to run the agenda now, don't you?
Okay.
Oh.
Yes, I believe should move to the bird box right on time. And we are staying at 6 minutes ahead of time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take the lead on this because I wrote the bird box maintenance memo. Last month's discussion had a lot to do with access to trails during the short period of time known as after winter and before spring, when things are mushy. And hence that's why we had the 12-page minutes. So I said in the middle of that, I would write a brief memo, which I kept to 1 page, procedures that the Catamount Community Forest members and volunteers could follow when maintaining bird nesting boxes of any type that are on the property during, and this is very specifically during that period of time. So this memo,
Good shot.
yeah, nothing like gnats and black flies and stuff in the meeting too. It's part of the CCF environment. So mostly the first 3 paragraphs are just saying that the the nest monitoring is an important part of our stewardship of the area. And we need to, because we're trying to enhance the number of birds that are nesting of particular types, we need to maintain these boxes. And timing for all the ones that we do, which are small birds and now some varieties of ducks, when they return to the area, they don't wait for the trails to dry out. So we need to do any maintenance or last minute maintenance during and early monitoring during this spring period. But we also appreciate that trampling on wet trails is something that we don't want to do to any great deal. So I wrote this procedure and Andrew has redlined one piece of it. That. Generally, we work in very small groups. I do the wood duck boxes and there's no more than two of us. It's usually one, me. Sometimes my brother-in-law is the other person who does this with me because he's an expert in this area. How many people would you have at any point?
Usually same thing, one, maybe Cheryl would be the other
Two,
person.
yeah.
Two.
So we're not talking about large crowds of people coming out. Can you clarify what you wrote in bullet 1? Do we actually have to give notice when we're going out? Is that a town requirement?
It is, so this is consistent with our insurance company's request. And it has to do with our volunteer waiver agreements.
If we
And
sign
then
a
how,
waiver,
and how,
we
yeah,
understand that well.
how do we define work?
Any volunteer activity where. How do we define
Good
it?
question.
Because if I'm installing a new wood duck box, that's work.
Mhm.
If I'm going to the existing box, opening it up and throwing in a pile of sawdust and taking out the old first, I don't consider that much work.
That would be included in work, because in that, the point is that you're going to town land under the guise of the town, doing an activity where you're, I assume, sometimes wading through water, sometimes wearing waders.
I got wet last week.
This is only for this month.
But this, and
Yeah,
this is, let me say, this
really
thing is
specific.
only pertains to
Yeah,
this very short
Well, I
period.
have
Yeah.
a question about that too, but
so this is, the memo pertains to that time. This requirement pertains to all work on town.
yes, I was assuming when I read it.
Because
Any,
I also work in Mud Pond
Mhm.
and I don't ever tell anybody I'm there.
Well, we've all signed a waiver. We've
Yeah,
signed a
yeah,
waiver for an entire year.
yeah, I think this is the only piece of property where we have this sort of interesting partnership going on there, right? That's, I mean, no one in you're not disturbing anybody in Mud Pond if you go walk
We're not
up there.
disturbing anybody at the
But
other,
that's not
I
the-
mean, the Catamount.
But that's not the
community
reason
either.
for the policy, right?
Yeah.
The policy, it sounds like it's
So-
related to insurance and town land irrespective of.
Let me clarify, this is not a policy, and I wanted to make sure that I had this right. It is not a policy yet, it should be a policy.
Wow.
It has been advised as best practice by our insurance company. And so that is how we're proceeding in the planning department. As a volunteer, if you're a volunteer for this committee, the Conservation Commission. It applies to all town land.
Yeah.
To Mud Pond as well, like in anything that's town
Correct,
owned. Right.
and. Happy to answer questions about specifics. Erin and I have been working on this. I understand it's a change from what's been done in the past. But that is how we're proceeding.
All right. All right. So the rest of it has to do, starting with 2. Looking at the work that either the small bird nesters or the big duck nesters or any other nesters, if we're doing eagle nesting, have to do to get out onto the roads. And most of our access is either currently via Jim McCullough's driveway and out onto some of the areas, or through Woods Trace. That's the name, that's the correct name, right? Which is a gravel road that Belco uses. So certainly any walking on there is not going to hurt anything. And then veering off, if we know where these boxes are, on the sides of trails, such that when I said, okay, anyone encountering a soft trail, grass soil, will travel away from trail edges and cross trails perpendicular to prevent damage. So that if Terry's marching up this side to 2 bluebird boxes, and then when it gets to one over here, and this happens to be a trail, she's gonna, moving perpendicular to the trail will minimize any impact. That's 3. 4, we're not gonna drive anything out there, even on the Woods Trace Road during this period of time. Access through wetland areas to perform maintenance, that's the wood ducks, that's me, it's restricted to 2 people, which it never would be more than that. We talked about, because people come out, the public comes out and might see some of us out there tromping around when the trails are closed, that we would have some sort of signage, a sandwich board that says, you know, important wildlife maintenance going on, please don't use trails if they're closed, these people are permitted. And then if we do either encounter trail damage or we inadvertently cause trail damage, we will notify staff of that event. And then number 8 is we should at least review this annually after we've gone, if we adopt it, after we've gone through a season to see how well it went. Obviously, we're beyond the season now. So this would pertain initially to next, what is it, April to early May? What's the closure period of the trails?
And it depends on
the weather.
season,
Yeah. You know, my maintenance will take, I only have 4 boxes. My maintenance will take an hour to an hour and a half total for the spring season. Doesn't include my walking out there, you know, so.
Okay. And how early, what's your window? I'm just curious.
You know, I was out there when there was snow on the ground. Actually, the people in the hub got me to use snowshoes instead of just dropping on my own. So that's how early I could be out there. But then again, the trails were still open. There was snow on them. But then right after that, they closed. And then I went back later. But the first time I went out there, I was using snowshoes. So because wood ducks come back very early.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they start looking around on their migratory paths north.
And the snow we had was late, so.
Yeah, that was the late
Really?
snow.
So,
But I did use snowshoes to get out to them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which helped quite a bit. So it's late winter. It could be snowing. I've been on ponds where they've been frozen, not these, but larger ponds where I've actually walked out to the boxes on the ponds. So doing the maintenance ahead of the birds is the optimal goal. You don't put any nesting materials in yours, do you?
No, we take it out.
You take it out. We take out the old stuff, but we give them luxury accommodations, you know, shavings, and, you know, the ducks love it, you know, so.
This memo covers
That's nice.
your bird boxes as well.
Yes, it,
Okay.
yeah.
And I'm typically not out there when there's snow. I usually wait till like end of March, which typically there isn't a whole lot of snow in, or early April, so. That's when those birds come back.
So this is based on the lengthy discussion we had a month ago. This is what I promised to put together in one page.
Thank you. You know, just the motivation to do this was if like the town wanted Outdoor Family Center just to pick a date and say, no, you know, the answer is no for anybody going on trails until this date. And then the concern I raised, which I just read in the meeting notes, was, yeah, but we can't miss the window for people to get out and take care of these boxes. So if we have a scenario, like, can we test this policy? Like if we have a scenario where literally like in February, it turns into mud season and it's just rain and mud straight through May 31st. Then we would have the trails closed, but the goal here is to make sure that even if the trails are closed, that you can get in there.
Yeah,
Right? Is that
yeah, I think that's by intent. For
Yeah,
instance, if I
yeah.
have a box on 2 boxes on the big pond and 1 each on the other 2 ponds.
Yeah.
So if I go through McCullough's driveway, that's still pretty much gravel.
Yeah.
Take a hard left, walk down the field, which isn't really a trail, that's where the grassy field is.
Yeah.
And get to those 2 boxes, and turn around and come out. I've probably caused no damage to the area.
Yeah.
And we want that to not be challenged and to be like pre-approved here.
Yeah,
So
and then
it's
going
like-
the other way, I go out Woods Trace, there's one on the pond, then
Yeah.
I get to the Velco line, I take a hard left and go down to the little pond. That's not even a trail, it's bushwhacking down through there. And again, if I spend an hour and a half doing all of that, because the boxes are built and we're not
Yeah.
expanding the numbers, I'd be surprised.
Would it be too much to like put a statement here that just says like, in the case where you know, box maintenance must be done, but trails are closed. Volunteers following this policy can go get the work done, like that's sort of, like this is kind of the. You know, hall pass, like, hey, even if the trails are closed.
Well, that's what the sentence right above
Is
the
that what it
bullet
says?
says. We propose the following procedures which will ensure that the process of maintaining bird boxes and the need for trail protection do not conflict during periods of trail closure.
Okay. Okay, if you feel that's
Okay.
closure,
Period of track closure is gonna be best.
And we
If the
see
trails are
during-
open, we're no different than anybody else.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
We're just tromping around out there.
I think from the outdoor friendly center's perspective, this seems good because, you
Yeah.
know, we want the, you know, the bird stuff to be able to happen and stuff.
Yeah.
And like putting the signs out notifying there's, you know, there's particular maintenance going on here, so
Right.
you know, people are like, ah, well, they were out there, why can't we go out with, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
our running club or whatever, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
and for outdoor family center staff, if they see a sign that says like volunteers are out, they'll be like,
I mean, if we leave this, you know,
Then-
if we make a sandwich board.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about 50 signs, and leave it at the hub
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something,
yeah.
just put it out when we need it,
Right,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do we see the need for vests? Which were, was
I think the sign
possibly,
probably should be fine.
Yeah,
okay,
we don't have hunting out there, so I'm not.
well, I'm not,
I
I
have to
don't,
wear
I
overalls.
would. For hunters,
I have them for another.
so the
group, and-
public recognizes that the volunteers that are doing this work are not the same. as
Yeah, I
the
kind of
public.
like the idea of vests because then the staff can see that that's the person who's.
I'm the one in waders going.
Yeah, that's fair, it's pretty obvious.
You're in waders, you're-
And I'm carrying a ladder.
People have looked at me and they're running in shorts and I've got waders on.
Where's he going?
Oh, he's in the pond now.
All right then, well,
This is
Uh,
very narrow. Is there, I mean, this is really just about, do we not have any issue any other time?
No, it's
No.
really,
How
it's
about,
just
like,
a-
It had to
Spaces.
do with trail protection during the
Yeah.
mud season.
But do we have a broader concern about people just going out there to cut down buckthorn or? They
no,
still
it's
need to
always,
have
it's organized.
They still need to have the, let you know 2 days in advance and all that, right?
Now,
Please, let's have lots of people want to go out and cut down.
Yeah,
As long as you've got somebody to dab them.
Mhm.
And just an aside, just thinking about that insurance, the notification thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe a discussion for the time, but. You know, obviously the outdoor center does trail work all the time, I guess that would fall under what it does under its license. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but this may not be the right venue for that.
Does your insurance cover volunteers that are out there working with Andy? I would hope so.
Yeah, imagine that, yeah, they all sign waivers, we have insurance, yeah.
Right.
But obviously, you know, we can't notify the town every time we're doing trail maintenance, you know, because it's ongoing.
yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
that was my, when Andrew wrote this, it catches me because, for instance, I didn't tell you this week, I was out there on Tuesday. Because it'd been raining for 5 days, you know, and so finally I pulled my big barn boots on and went slogging through the sludge. Of course, it isn't trail closure time, but
Right.
you know, it's very opportunistic. I get up in the morning, okay, it's not raining, I need to go out there, you know. I need to tell you once a week, I'm going to be out there sometime this week. I can't guarantee you a day it is, you know, so.
and we've done that a little bit, and we've been working on that,
Yeah,
right? And it's, I understand that it's a change,
yeah.
but yeah, we can also talk later,
Just have an automatic.
we've had some back and forth.
Once a week.
You and I, Alan, to answer your question, we're talking about town volunteers specifically here,
Okay,
not Catamount volunteers.
good.
Which I think almost raises the question a little bit, because there was something about Jim doing, Jim is a volunteer with Catamount, so what he's doing on the logging, you know, there was something about how he's
Well, he helped,
clearing.
he helped with the invasives, right? He mowed the, did Jim go out and mow some sections, or you were trying to get something before?
Not this year,
Oh,
no.
no. What was he doing there?
He must, it was in the,
He was clearing up the, where the
The
log.
logging
Oh,
stuff, so
right,
that,
yeah.
like, he's covered though,
That
right?
was
Somebody's got
his-
him covered under an umbrella
For
somewhere.
your, under
He's
your.
covered under the, under the,
Okay,
yeah, the nonprofit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we don't want him to get hurt and then be somewhere in between in a
Right.
big area.
yeah,
This is beyond the scope of this committee, but just so you know, there's a broader process right now. We actually have our insurance company assessing much of town. And part of that has been out at Catamount as well. I was just out at a walk with John this week, and we walked with a representative from our insurance company as well. So that is going on as well. That might apply to some of the concerns that you raised, Alan, or questions.
And that would have been great to have a committee member along too, you know, to include somebody from the committee. You know, to go out and walk around the land and also take a different perspective.
Mhm. So with regard to this. Madam Chairman,
Yeah. what do
Take it,
have?
we still have 3.
are
Yeah,
we,
go for it.
do we? Want to? Make it a motion to adopt this as amended, or does anybody else have? Amendments to it, or shall we say this is a procedure we're gonna utilize? Because this is what I'm presenting.
I like it.
I hear a motion to
I would
approve.
make a motion to approve this.
And I'll second it. I think it covers all the scenarios.
All right,
All right, then. Would we all like to all vote now?
yes,
All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand and indicate.
Aye.
Negatives, please say no. All right, the ayes have it.
Yay.
Nice job.
All right. Good job.
We have adopted our nest box program and we are 7 minutes ahead of time.
And stuff gets done at these meetings, wow.
Yes.
So moving along to the Outdoor Family Center's proposal for wedding update to management plan.
Yes,
This is a half an hour discussion, so we're prepared for your presentation.
I have a rebuttal. It's not a rebuttal.
okay, so. This document that I sent out is pretty long, but it represents mostly me trying to learn and cover all of the. Documents and read what they say and say, okay. Do I understand how they all fit together? So we've got the easement. We have 2 easement holders that have an opinion on how the easement document's written. And then we have the management plan. And then we have the license agreement. So I read all 3 of them and tried to figure it out. So that's why this document's so long. But the long and the short of it is there is public interest, and I'm reading and the Outdoor Family Center has interest to hold weddings at the CCF. There's lack of clarity of the Catamount conservation easement, permitted use of quote celebrations, and whether weddings specifically are a permitted activity that COFC can host. The easement, see link and excerpt below, allows for concerts, fairs, and celebrations. Does this mean weddings? Currently, the CCF management plan does not mention concert, fairs, and celebrations as allowed or not allowed. So it's silent. So what I'm submitting is a written request on behalf of the Outdoor Family Center. I mean, it's like my one hat I'm wearing. And I'm trying to suggest that I'm trying to think as a CCF committee member too. But I won't vote on this. I probably, when we get to voting on this, because I'm part of the Outdoor Family Center and I have an interest in this, I think I probably would recuse myself and say, I'm not gonna vote on this. And also as a Williston resident who loves CCF and enjoys seeing the people get out and use the property. So I'm requesting this committee to consider this topic thoughtfully for discussion. And upon agreement, allow submission of a request to the select board to update the management plan with clarifications regarding weddings, that is. But apparently before we even do that, we would share the draft management plan with our 2 easement holders. Because the 2 easement holders asked, well, we think weddings could be allowed, but we don't want like 1 million weddings, like all the time impacting the land. So please come back to us with a revision of the management plan. And then the easement holders would consider like, oh, okay, well, we think that would be okay. And it seems like we'd want to get them to agree before we give it to the select board. So I think that's where we would be heading. But this week is just a discussion. And then you can
Who
jump
are
in
the
and
easement
correct me.
holders? Sorry. Are they neighbors?
It's the Vermont Land Trust and the Vermont Conservation and Housing Board. May have gotten the order there wrong. CHB.
That's
yes.
right, yeah, and when the land is acquired, they, from the McCulloughs, they both have easements on the property, and that, those are actually sort of the highest governing documents, if the town has to abide by them as well.
Right.
And not the trust for public lands, they're not included.
That,
I believe the Trust for Public Lands transferred
Okay.
that to the more local organizations.
So the perspective, so I had 5 points to consider, and then we can go into any of them and go deeper. So Jim, so part of this was, you know, the sentiment we got from Jim, and so you could read his letter, but the sentiment was, through the whole process, the intent was the Outdoor Family Center could continue to operate what it's been doing. And, you know, Jim's involvement through the management plan creation and the easement, you know, he came out the other end saying like, oh yeah, weddings are allowed, that's fine. And I don't know if it was over the course of the last few years, I don't know when we ever like decide, or the town considered and said our weddings allowed. I don't know how that transpired, but we found ourselves this spring in a place where the town said, oh, no, you're not allowed to do, the easement doesn't allow weddings. And we said, well, you know, Jim was there when it was written and like, he's thinking it was. So Jim wrote a note, Jim wrote a letter reflecting that when it says celebrations, the intent, at least from Jim, who was there, believed that that was going to be including weddings. So that was one thing. And I have 5 points, I'll talk through them and then we can dig into them deeper if you want. My second point was there's public interest for weddings. So Outdoor Family Center has been contacted a few times about hosting weddings, to which we've said no. But, you know, the Outdoor Family Center's mission, and I think the town's interest is that people use the property and they, you know, can take advantage of this wonderful asset that the town has. So we, COFC, I say we, because I'm on the board, putting on that hat, has interest for weddings as well. Weddings could generate some revenue, similar to what other user fees which fund the property of the maintenance have. And we've seen this last year, we had a dramatic decrease of winter skiing revenue due to climate change. An alternative activity, such as weddings, could support maintenance funding, which benefits the general public for free pedestrian use. So, you know, we got to pay the guys to mow it, you know, upkeep trails. So there's, you know, there's revenue needed for the nonprofit to continue to operate with staff and contractors. So the next point, which I think is a guiding principle, is if we did allow weddings, and we'll go through these documents in point 5, but if we did get all these documents to line up and say like, aha, you know, we've amended the management plan and it talks specifically about weddings. If we did allow weddings, the weddings would fall under the TEP process. So the TEP process today,
What is that?
the temporary event permit process. So if you want to do an event in the town, you have to go through based on like some thresholds, what an event is, right? You're allowed to have your friends over and have a barbecue in your backyard without a TEP. But at some point you have to apply with the town and go to the select board and apply for a TEP, a temporary event permit. So currently, the CCF or the Outdoor Family Center is subject to this TEP. Although in the license agreement, the thresholds were changed because we had to do TEPs for everything. And we were like having to cancel a ton of events. So for Outdoor Family Center, we can have events with a few more people than what the rest of the town can do. You know, so there's a few favorable things. So we go to TEP for less things. But for camping, for overnight, more than 50 people there after 10 p.m. and alcohol, food being served. You know, all these things sound like a wedding to me.
More than 200 people regardless, I can't remember what that threshold is.
Yeah, it was like 250 people, I think.
Or something, look it up,
Yeah. So if any of those are met, then we need, then the Outdoor Family Center together with whoever wants to do the event has to apply for a temporary event permit. We're only allowed 12 a year. So 12 like if we did 12, well, like if we burned up all temporary event permits on weddings, max there'd be 12 weddings a year at Outdoor Family Center. But as it is
There-
today,
Max of 12, anything.
max of
Yes.
12
Right,
anything.
yeah.
Bigger events.
And
yeah.
as it is now, you know, we probably have 2 or 3 or 4 kind of regularly on the calendar. There's Richmond trail running event that they have overnight, so that gets a TEP. You know, so there are a few other things. The cyclocross
Yeah.
event in the fall. You know, so we don't even have 12. So the limit on weddings, you know, would be, you know, I don't know, 5 or 6. So it's not like a million weddings you're gonna have. So I thought it was important to comment on like limitations. So what? Yeah. So then the next thing is, so that's boundiness to begin with. We're not talking about changing that. We're not. That was a long topic at the select board. So given that, if we go through these relevant documents one at a time, I have excerpts from each one. We have the easement, which I already said, the easement says we can do concerts, fairs, and celebrations. But the easement also says you can do snowmobiles and horses and a bunch of other stuff, which the management plan does not allow. So the easement, at some levels, the easement's fine. The easement says we can do celebrations, fairs, and so we don't need to change that document. But we do need to go back to the easement holders and say, have we correctly interpreted it? The management plan is now going to talk about weddings.
I would say the word celebrations in itself is so vague as
Yeah.
to, you know.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
broad.
and in fact, if somebody said, well, I'm going to get my 6 horse riders together, that's a celebration, you know, but if you have another one that's conflicting it, then
Yeah.
that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah, so like the list of celebrations would be endless. Now, I don't want to open the can of worms too big, but it says concerts, fairs, and celebrations. So this is something for our committee to consider. The Outdoor Family Center is interested in weddings, which is a type of celebration. So we need to put language in the management plan about allowing celebrations. Maybe we say birthday parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs. Like we're not, you know, are we gonna list all of them? I don't know. But then do we want to tackle concerts and fairs too? Because currently the management plan is silent on concerts and fairs. And that the easement kind of lumps those together, concerts, fairs, and celebrations. It kind of gives it to you as a package. Hey, you can do this stuff.
So was the conservation easement created by the land trust? Or because the Catamount Community Forest Plan is one document, but the easement, does the Catamount Community Forest Plan override the easements? I mean, so
No.
anybody could ride a snowmobile or take horses on the community forest right now because it's in the easement.
No, but the management plan further bounds it. So the easement says you can do this. And the management plan says, oh, that's really nice, but we're only gonna do this.
Right, so the management plan right now does not say celebrations.
That's right. It's silent on.
Right, it doesn't
It's
say that,
silent
just
on
like
those.
horse riding and snowmobiling.
But see, the management plan is not silent on horseback riding. The management plan says no horseback riding.
And no dogs.
No dogs,
And no
no
dogs.
hunting, no.
Right.
And,
Right.
and yeah, and so the easement
Right.
says you can hunt. So the management plan, and it's the town's, you know, the
So
town
that
can do what they want.
Overrides the easement.
It doesn't override the easement, it further, yeah, I mean, you can think of it that way.
Yeah.
Narrows
It
it.
could
You
narrow
could-
it.
Narrows
It
it
narrows
down,
it.
right,
It
yes.
narrows it.
How does the cyclocross get approved then if it's not, if it's silent on events? Is it
Well,
silent?
it's a race, so there's in the
It's not a celebration.
in the management plan, it specifically as well, it specifically talks about mountain biking and races and skiing and races. Those are events that are allowed at the Outdoor Family Center.
Foot races.
And the license agreement then furthermore says that, and actually the management plan says that like Catamount Outdoor Family Center can charge money for it. So the management plan says that. Yeah, races.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess as I studied the management plan, you know, the management plan says, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do this. But it was just silent on concerts, fairs, and celebrations. So it doesn't say you can, it doesn't say you can't.
I think, or it kind of ran out of time. It was a year and a half of
The management plan.
working on a management plan.
Yeah,
Once a month for a year and a half.
so I
And
don't wanna,
think
We're done
people-
now.
It just, yeah, I think it just ran out of time to really narrow down onto like, really,
Yeah.
because. I guess maybe, I can't remember, it's 2017. You know, the outdoor center has a mission statement and that's all around, you know. Outdoor activity and. You know. Camps and things like that, it doesn't really, it doesn't talk about having weddings and other kind of events, so. I don't know, and then I remember talking a little bit about 4th of July. Parties and events out there and, you know, I think the committee was just like, oh. I don't think that the town really wanted to go there and make this like a party place.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think they just didn't pursue adding that, in at that time.
And that was before there was a TEP process in the town too.
We
Yeah.
were really not part of that process here in this committee.
That
Yeah, right.
was a good part of my life.
Right.
What the management plan was?
No, the TEP.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and that, am I correct, that was after 2018 or whatever you did the.
Last year.
Well, there was a TP before that, but it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, but
enforced
it was
very
like-
much,
It
and
was
it
very
was
loose,
very
yeah.
loose.
It got written for
Oh,
Catamount, so, in my opinion.
The TEP, I thought it got written for this place on Route 2 that was having party weddings.
The Ocean Barn or whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were hustling to get it done so that they could.
Oh,
include it in the
oh.
license, that's all I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was
yeah, yeah.
dependency,
Yes.
but the reason for doing the TEP to begin with. There was a deadline to finish the TEP work, so the license could get renewed, but the reason for having a more restrictive TEP was from complaints of the COVID. Of people having parties and this red barn, I don't know, on Route 2, just
Yeah,
out of town.
Copperfield, yeah.
That was one that, like, there was a lot of complaints about. I mean, I never complained. Okay, so if you page down, so let's look at the conservation easement a little bit. And then we'll look at the community forest plan. Oh, so first here's Jim's letter.
Now, Jim did have weddings when he ran the center, but he also had a wedding field. He had a bed and breakfast, I mean, so that all kind of,
And we leased the wedding field from him. It's in our lease agreement, so we're paying for a wedding field and we're not allowed to use. Like that was,
so you are.
yeah,
was at
the outdoor family center, outdoor family center. So, I mean, you can read on your own time, but basically Jim kind of looks at the document and he says, here's celebrations, and his understanding was that. You know, weddings are included in that, they weren't gonna go list out every last celebration. So I think the conservation easement isn't our problem. I think the easement holders gave us a path forward, and the main goal is to get to the management plan, so maybe page down to the next slide.
Is the wedding you said the wedding meadow, is that part in your leasing it, so that's not part of the forest?
Right, it's
It's-
privately owned,
Split.
yeah.
Yeah,
There is a little bit where he mows, where he probably shouldn't.
Right, yeah.
Which is part of the community forest, but when he owned it. He mowed all of it, so he's continued to mow.
yeah. Okay, so here's an excerpt from the easement, again, you can go read it, but I cut and paste some section. Here, under section 3.6. The right to conduct temporary community and public entertainment events and competitions on the protected property, including concerts, fairs, and celebrations. Together with tents, temporary structures for such events and event sponsorship, signage, and banners, provided that such events shall not result in the clearing of any forested areas. And providing further that such events are consistent with the purpose of this grant management plan. So. Concerts, fairs, celebrations. At first I came at this looking for weddings and celebrations, but then I thought, oh goodness, maybe we should also consider concerts and fairs. Nobody's asking for concerts and fairs, but it's just our committee's opportunity. You know, nobody in the town could do a fair there. If we wanted to do I don't know, like a farmer's market. I think it wouldn't be allowed with the management plan today, or the management plan is silent on it. So then there's the community forest plan, that's our management plan. And it says the conservation easement requires us to have a management plan. It tells you what you can do. Blah, blah, blah. Identify the objectives, permitted use set forth in section 3 of the easement. So we just read that, section 3, part 6. There's actually part 1 through 11 of section 3 of what's allowed. I just singled out 6, which is relevant. And then K is allow for the license or management agreement uh, approved by the grantees to have all of the same permitted uses described in section 3 conducted or operated, managed by a qualified. So that's just saying, hey, all these things in section 3, you also could let the licensee, which is the Outdoor Family Center, do those things too. So if we go down, and point B, the management plan references the easement. Yeah, we already saw that. And point K extends that permitted uses to the license agreement. So now we go to the management plan. The management plan does further restrict what can happen on the property. These are my comments. Example, easement allows hunting horses and snowmobiles, but the management plan does not allow those activities. Management plan does not talk about weddings. It only points back to the easement where we read that celebrations are allowed. So here's our license agreement with Outdoor Family Center and the town. You're allowed to do only what's in the conservation easement and what's in the forest management plan. So I think the license agreement doesn't have to be changed either, because it says whatever you're allowed to do, whatever the management plan says, then that's okay in the license agreement. And then I mentioned the TEP. And you don't need, oh, here's the TEP, this is part of the license agreement. So those are the thresholds that if Outdoor Family Center wanted to host a wedding, if the wedding hit any of these, anybody there, and 225 is the number.
Right.
If you have more than 225 people, you need a TEP. Or if you have people there, 50 people past 10 p.m., or if you can't, or if you alcohol, or if you have a tent bigger than 1,200 square feet. So our feeling is most weddings are gonna, want alcohol or maybe be there late. So it's likely that, and I do say events that do not exceed these thresholds and criteria do not require a temporary event permit and do not require notification to the town. I mean, I guess if somebody wanted to walk out in the middle of the field with a ordained minister or justice of the peace, they could go out there and get married
With 100,
today.
224 other favorite, the best friends.
Yeah, I guess so,
They
right?
have no alcohol and.
No
like,
alcohol,
yeah,
no tent.
No alcohol, no tent. Yeah, so hypothetically, there's a wedding.
Mhm.
There's some semblance of a wedding that could happen. Although I don't know how you get 225 people to come if there's no
Alcohol.
Okay, so then I had some comments on that. What did I say? The TEP is required. The TEP only lets us do 12. Very small celebrations that do not meet the threshold will not require TEP. Would be similar use to other activities at COFC like camps, races, or just a busy day. I mean, arguably on a busy winter day, there's that number of people already. So it's not unheard of to have that number of people up to 225. Okay, and now we get to the management agreement, and then I wrote a proposal of like what the management agreement text could say. So the existing management agreement says these activities are allowed under Outdoor Family Center. So the blue is existing. So it says you can do mountain biking, fat biking, cyclocross, individually and races. You can charge money for it. Yep. You gotta wear a helmet, don't forget that. Nordic skiing, kind of the same thing. We don't do races because the snow is too unpredictable. I mean, there's no events around skiing. When it snows, you go. So here was my totally well, I mean, I spent some time on this, right? It wasn't like I just. This is my thoughtful attempt at what would be added to the management plan, and I was there for the year and a half of negotiations, so. I appreciate that adding to the management plan is not a small thing. But I say draft additions, concerts, fairs, and celebrations. We could narrow it. I started broader because I wanted us to discuss those three things together because it's silent on them. We should say they're allowed or not, right? I mean, so concerts, fairs, and celebrations may be held at CCF along with tents and other temporary structures for such events, and event sponsorship signage and banners. I mean, I copied a little bit of this from the above section. Provided that such events shall not result in the clearing of any, so I copied that from another section. And provided further that such events are consistent with the purpose of the easement and the management plan. So, fees are charged for these activities as provided in the license agreement with COFC and the town of Williston as attached in Exhibit C. So I really tried to stay consistent with the language that was being repeated up above. And then I put a note, all events are subject to the TEP, the triggering thresholds, annual maximum. Okay, now so then I say concerts. So now we'll go into each one of those. Concerts may include, but are not limited to live recorded or remotely broadcasted school bands, town bands, marching bands, other type of music, vocal groups. Concerts are subject to all relevant town rules. And now this is my footnote. I didn't come here to ask for us to do concerts. We could delete this right now and I would not care one bit. But I do say, I can't imagine we'd have a loud amplified band and we would want to restrict that. So if we say anything about concerts being allowed, it just needs to be kind of tight because, we're not.
End up with fish.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. That's not what we want.
But
So
a bunch of elementary school kids out there, having a little band, music in the meadow or something like that seems like it'd be a good thing,
So we could further restrict it, but I'm putting it on the table for consideration. Do we want to, when and if we go to the select board and say, we'd like to amend the management plan with this addition, we could choose as a committee to put concerts in, or we might not. Fairs may include, but are not limited to, farmers markets, book fairs, small business fairs, and other fairs fitting with the town forest. That's what I wrote on fairs. And then I say celebrations may include, but are not limited to, birthdays, graduations, reunions, religious and secular celebrations, weddings, and memorials. That was my attempt to make a list of what a celebration would be. Yeah, so that was my, if we fast forward all the way to the end, if we agree upon something, we'd be submitting a paragraph or two for addition to the management plan. That was my draft. I'm done. So what do you guys think?
I have comments.
Yes.
So first, thank you for putting that in and explaining it. I wasn't familiar with the temporary event permit process, so you answered some of my questions. I don't know, because a lot of people are working and not sitting around retired like I am. You may not have seen this page and a half that I submitted today.
Yeah.
So this is based on personal experience, both professionally and as an individual, on how weddings are put together and what to expect. So I wrote up a bunch of bullet points, which the TEP covers, dealing with size, number of events a year, where they can be held, parking, shelters. And you're welcome to go through this. Some of them specifically to weddings. This is the professional side because my wife was in the floral business and owned several companies. Floral arrangements have to be delivered, and most florists assume there will be some sort of refrigeration because they're delivered many hours ahead of time. That's something you probably would have trouble accommodating. I would say that if you look at what you're proposing and look at what the TEP already requires, which covers quite a few of the things that I wrote, I would encourage the Outdoor Family Center to do some research on what it means to hold a wedding celebration by talking to other venues that do this. Most venues that do this have an indoor facility. Unfortunately, you don't have access to, McCullough's house like that he may have in the past. And that restricts it solely to the outdoors. And that makes it a little bit more difficult. For instance, wedding parties come in and then they want to go, all right, we've done this much of the wedding, maybe we had the ceremony, now we're gonna have the party, we want to change. And get out of these clothes because they do, and they run to the building and change and come back out in something else. You're going, well, go hide behind that tree over there, that may be a bit more difficult to do. You've already covered alcohol, that was a question I had, caterers. How big are the caterers, how big are the tents, some of those things already look like they're in the TDP. Parking you're already addressing. It's really, not only do we want to consider allowing these, but how is, and COFC has experience managing events, obviously licensing things, but weddings are a different beast. Just because they're a more formal, unless so you're welcome to read through these. I think the TEP probably already addresses music and noise control.
Safety and police and fire, all that.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so I wasn't at all familiar with it, so I think probably 2/3 of what I put questions on here are maybe covered by that already. But knowing that weddings are the term my wife always uses, don't tick off the bride. Because they will, they'll get there and they'll go, that's not what I expected, and it's so.
Reading over your list, Reed, I had sort of a 30,000-foot question though, because let's assume that the Adams just had a family wedding in their yard, right? So it's the same zone. It was, I don't know if it had 225 people, but it was a big tent. It was all that kind of stuff. Is there anything that this committee would say is different because it's being held in the community forest than any other ag rural place? Like, is this and we've already kind of said 12 events, so to narrow that would be a little difficult, but are we disturbing the wildlife? Is there something, are we causing more damage to, I don't know, the facility? Is there something that's unique that would be concerning this committee as opposed to anywhere else in the ag world?
Yeah, I think.
Can I jump in and ask, because is this something we're deciding today, or this is like a proposal today, and we're having a pre-discussion today?
Yeah, on concept level
Concept
was the
level.
instructions from Aaron.
Yeah, and we would.
Because
take the input and do a revision.
the Outdoor Family Center asked already. Is that what Jim's letter said? Or was that years ago?
So Outdoor Family Center has had people come and say, can we do a wedding there? And then we've had to say no, because the town says, no, you're not allowed to do that.
Right.
And then we say, well, wait a minute. And then there was a discussion even with the town of like, they didn't think the easement allowed for it. So the easement, you read it, celebration, right? But so like, on one hand, you could say, you could make that leap, but I think that the good approach is to consult the easement holders.
I think it was, if I remember right, it was like around 4th of July or Memorial Day, and it was more focused around town events. Because I'll go back to the thought of, your mission statement doesn't talk about having weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that. Your mission statement says, races and, bike races.
I mean,
I don't really agree with that. The mission statement is for people to make the outdoors their first choice. So it's not focused on necessarily competition.
Says promote family and community well-being through activity and education in the forest.
I think there's the mission statement and there's the
I can
what's
read
the other
it.
one?
Yeah, no, I
Luckily we have internet.
took it off of the website.
Yeah, there's a a mission statement, there's a, what's the other thing?
Promote family and community well-being through activity and education. We're an education-based nonprofit in the Catamount Community Forest.
Yeah,
We envision a community in which playing in nature is everyone's first choice.
that's the one, right, playing in nature.
So I'm just
Yeah,
trying to say that's why the committee, the year and a half committee. Wasn't thinking about weddings and because the town is not interested in hosting weddings at their town forest. That wasn't something they were gonna look into and. I guess I'm just thinking, back that many years ago is that, well, the outdoor center is doing recreation, they're not doing weddings.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying is that this could be a one-off. In your opinion, it's a one-off from their mission and it doesn't address the mission, which we could discuss that, but I really wanted to hear if we had another.
To your question,
Mhm.
yes, I think. A wedding without. A facility for people to utilize. Is. Can have more effect on the grounds, also controlling. When people come for a bike event.
They
They
change
kind of
course,
have
too.
experience of
Hope so.
where to go or on the trails doing these things.
Mhm.
People come for weddings because I also worked at Catamount Golf Course,
Mhm.
which used to host a lot of weddings. They can get out of hand sometimes, and they had a building facilitating them. Not that they were rowdy events, but the noise level rises with the alcohol consumption. And then and then eventually everything works out fine and people clean up, but they had a building to do it in. You don't have a building for this wedding. I've been to many weddings that have had tents, but there's always been a building associated with that venue. If it's the.
I'd have to think about that a little bit, if I would
18
consider that our problem or the bride's problem, but I.
Oh, no, it's ours, a responsibility for the land. That's.
What do you
it.
think they're gonna do, that they're gonna?
Or even if. Some members of the wedding wander off into the woods and get lost. Those kinds of things, which can happen. And they gave me a little bit of pause to say. When you have a building, you corral people. You end up with people inside. My son's wedding was in his backyard with a tent, but he still had access to his home. So we hosted this big tent wedding with 100 people and they ran all over his property but they knew there was the house to go to at some point as the evening wound down. There's no house to go to.
I mean, I could argue that this further bounds the impact because there's no house to go to.
Yeah.
Like if somebody wants to do a wedding. We say there's no building. They say, oh, well, no, I don't care. I still want to do it.
Yeah.
We're gonna be there for an hour. I want Mount Mansfield in the background or Camel Hump in the background. I wanna get married and then we're gonna go on a merry way.
Well, that's
Like, I
not a
don't-
typical wedding, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm
No,
just
no.
Or set up
suggesting,
a tent.
Some, yes.
I'm suggesting that if they, the select board always can like. Deny a TP request, right? If there's alcohol, if there's a tent, select board can deny that,
Right.
right? And I guess I'm suggesting that without a building. Like, if somebody wants to have a wedding and accepts there's no building. And like, it's managed effectively, if anything, they'll stay there shorter, probably.
Yeah, and the select board would, if it went up one time, they would deny it the second time, so.
And the outdoor family center certainly
Oh,
would
that's a
not
good
want
point.
out of control wedding.
No, I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying every wedding gets out of control, I'm just saying that even if you. I think I'll get the name wrong, but the 1820 house that was down on Route 7. Toward south of Middlebury, I went to a couple of weddings there. And they had a big tent, but they also had their facility. Where they did their cooking and that kind of stuff, and so those things facilitate each other with the wedding.
So my concern when I read this, my first concern was, would having a wedding there of 200 people, limit access for everybody else?
The public.
Yeah,
Right, that's like a legitimate concern, yeah.
yeah.
So I think outdoor friendly center would have to have ways of mitigating that.
Mhm.
In other words, the wedding parking is here, day of signage. Public parking access is here, so it would be clear so that
Mhm.
it wouldn't, we would not want to limit public access.
So I
We
have a
do-
question about like where on the property, I had that really hasn't been. You can't really say you can have it at Jim and Lucy's because they could sell tomorrow and
Right.
you would lose that, so you can't plan on that field to be used, so. That would leave the area near the hub or the field over at Goose Hill or. So what is your vision of like, where would these weddings be held? Would you set up a tent and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we can go and sketch that out and come back with what that
Because
would be. I
it-
mean, my starting point was. We do have a 5-year lease agreement, which we might renew another 5 years, unless Jim leaves and then we have nothing, right?
Well, it
Then we
sounds,
don't even have a building.
right,
So we are urgently trying to come up with something. But at some point, if we do have a building, like that would change things. And the wedding field, I mean, I guess the starting point is like, if this was done now. And somebody called and said, I wanna do a wedding, we'd say, great news. We have a wedding field, lots of weddings have been done there before. Jim and team has done lots of weddings there. And then, but you're not gonna have this, you're not gonna have that, right? And then we get into all those logistics of like
I guess
building
I'm
what you have.
confused because I've heard the outdoor center say that. That the driveway is gonna shut down in like a year or two, that we're not gonna have access.
Yeah, but you put
And
in
so
this
that's-
Word document that you're gonna use that driveway to get there.
Well, yeah.
So the
because
point is, as long as we have it, that's where it would be.
Right,
If we
okay,
don't have the wedding field, yes, we need to have. it
Which is the
somewhere
wedding
else.
field?
It's, if you go past Jim's house.
Yeah,
And then past that little cottage, there's an entrance in and there's a field right there.
near his garage.
So it's
oh.
between like the
Yes.
pond and
okay.
the,
I thought you were gonna say one, the big love sign.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So,
it says stand here to get married. It's a big sign in the middle of the field. No.
I was just gonna say, to your point on the like lack of facilities, like, I definitely appreciate that, but there's sort of a self-selection, like if someone calls up and says, we're gonna have a wedding, we're like, yeah, there's no indoor space, this is the deal, so I think.
It does,
You know.
it does. A lot of people will just say, oh, that's
That's
not
not
what
what I
I'm thinking of.
Right,
Right. I
So-
think it actually lends itself to smaller events.
Yeah,
Because when I wrote this, I took the devil's advocate that they're all gonna be 500 people weddings, but they're not. They're not, they are more than likely smaller events, yeah.
Yeah.
In which case you could say, well, yeah, do you use the grassy areas by the hub? Or do you, well, use this field,
Yeah.
and.
3/4 on town land.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, the town has really been, I don't think they've ever said that.
Oh, is that the boundary line?
Yeah, that's.
Oh, I see.
So, yeah.
So you tell the
that's-
wedding, do not cross this yard.
Put up snow fencing.
And I must say, I
Yeah.
started out by saying, hey, this sounds like a wonderful idea. I was just trying to think
Yeah,
of,
yeah. no,
of
that's good.
reasons that it could make it complex.
You did mention wildlife, and I do want to point that out, is that, we are Catamount Community Forest in this committee, and we're stewards of the land and the wildlife and all that. And typically June, weddings happen in June, July, some in August. And
September.
typically, that is right when a lot of deer are raising their young. The birds are nesting, the bird boxes and the ponds and things. So to have, and this is another thing to consider, the noise ordinance. If you're having noise till 10, 11 at night, and you've got these animals that are trying to, raise their young, that's a big impact. That is a big impact. And then you've got the neighbors. I mean, I think that when a year and a half with that committee, we talked about a lot of different things. It was hunting, it was, whatever, but it was the neighbors. We really did consider how are the neighbors going to be impacted on this. And I think that if this does go forward, that the neighbors need to be in on this conversation too. I mean, you can't just have all the folks on Giovanni Lane all of a sudden not knowing about this and all of
Oh,
a
yeah.
sudden
Well,
they start having weddings.
I guess sorry, it all falls under the TEP, so you know, there could be, I don't see how a wedding is really, like, I appreciate your.
Just being a
Mind
good
the
neighbor.
land, you
Yeah.
know, like, that's good, and,
Yeah.
but in terms of, you know, wedding isn't really any different than a bike race or a running race in some senses.
I think
know,
it
like-
is, because you don't have
The neighbors.
music, you don't have alcohol, I
Oh,
mean, maybe
oh.
you do have
Yeah, they have
alcohol,
both,
but
Oh, I have,
So
I have an
there's-
amplified PA there. for
Yeah,
bike
right, I
races,
was
so
gonna
that's-
say.
with
Yeah.
music though,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
until 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock, I
Not
mean,
till 10, but.
that's I mean,
Well, I think
so,
10 o'clock.
but
well,
just
you have
because,
to think about
but just
that stuff,
because
yeah.
it says 10 o'clock at night is a threshold for the TEP, you can't say all weddings are gonna have music until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, they'll get eaten by mosquitoes and they'll kill themselves,
Yeah.
right?
These
So,
are things to
Yeah,
really take into,
absolutely.
But I-
and I think Reed's advice is to talk to other folks that do weddings. I
Very
think you're-
ironic that Mike Tyson would just step down, given how many weddings.
Right, yeah, that's
But
true.
I would jump on that is also to talking to other town forests that do it, like, or do we do weddings in other
I don't
town
think they're-
lands?
I don't think
And
there's
has,
any
has
comparable.
Heinsberg Town
Oh,
Forest?
yeah,
done
like a Scutney Outdoors is a great example, where that is town-owned land, it has the same easement from the Vermont Land Trust. And they have an outdoor center that hosts events, and it's very comparable.
And so
They have a
that would be
building,
somebody to
too.
talk
They
to.
do.
You
Facility.
know, how many do they do a year? How much
Yeah.
sizes? Do they restrict sizes? Do they,
Right.
you know, look at
so,
modest size and how do they accommodate needs for food, electricity, water, you know, and those kinds of
Right,
things.
is there gonna be generators?
So the
running?
thing I
mean,
wanna-
that's another
the
thing.
thing I wanna separate here is
Yeah,
outdoor family centers feasibility of whether they want to actually try to have weddings. Is different than updating the management plan. To greenlight the outdoor family center to even see if they can make it work, right?
Yeah,
So
I saw them as being.
the management
and-
plan,
and As a. As. I took it the other way around, that the outdoor family center would determine the feasibility. And then be able to go to. Present an amendment to the plan. That would be more likely to be adopted if you had ammunition that says, oh, if these are the 20 things we need to consider, we've answered all those questions.
so can I offer a perspective?
Please.
Time is money. And right now. Our staff expenses are the number one expense, and John's spending time on Act 250. On managing the grant, trying to run camps, we had a terrible winter. The revenue's way down, we had to cut, the outdoor family center had to like cut hours of some staff. Just to not, bleed money, so. I don't think the outdoor family center is gonna invest a lot of time currently on something that's not even allowed. So I don't wanna suggest that like they come up with this perfect business case, because we're talking like fringe things, like this is like 1 or 2 weddings a year. It'd be nice for the community. to
Or
be able to
6
use
to
the
8, I
property.
mean, once we approve it, it's,
Yeah.
it could be 6 to 8.
It could be, but it would be
Beautiful
bounded
wedding.
there, right, for purposes of the management plan, that's the backstop. Right, but making it work is a lot of effort, and I don't think the outdoor family center, they have a lot to manage, so if we green light. Having weddings to be allowed, then they could make it work, I mean, Jim somehow made it work. We do have a building with Jim's. We leased Jim's building today. If at any point in time, there's no building at all. Then there's a lot of other things that break too. But I guess I wanted to suggest that we consider the management plan. And whether we say this is something that should be allowed, and then the outdoor family center would have to make a go of it within all of these constraints. The TEP is a backstop for quantity, there's a backstop for the select board to deny it. Right, this would be like, if there's 1 or 2 weddings in the next year or 2, I would be delighted that. The community could use the property in that way.
So, so you are, say when there's an event there, when there's a biking event or something, you guys are on the ground, you're there, you're monitoring, you're doing all that. With a wedding, it's a person, an entity just coming in, are you gonna have the same
Yeah,
watch
On-site
over
staff, oh, sure.
staff,
Yeah.
so you would have staff there that
Yeah.
would be
I
kind
mean,
of.
it would be a paid you know, it would be a paid thing, right? So, you know, well, how many people you bring to the wedding? We've got to get porta potties, we gotta order extra porta potties. You know, we need parking attendants, you know, so I could see, yeah, there's additional staff hours.
Mhm.
And it would be fully, can you imagine it, and the idea here is that it's a paid activity, right? So, but the management plan today says is skiing and biking, you can do races and events and make that paid. With the management plan, if we edit it, it would say, you know, weddings, outdoor family center, A, you're allowed to do it, and B, it can be a paid event. And then for sure, if somebody's paying, then they're gonna expect some service.
So I guess where I'm kind of sitting right now is that I would love it if we could have a perfect little pristine forest that we didn't have to say this. I know that money is an object, and it seems like with a limited number of events, if you know they're well managed and they're not out of control, they're not too loud, and they fit within the TEP, you know, I think it could be a one solution, one arrow in your quiver to not having it full, right? I mean, we have to make this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the town's not gonna, I mean, town doesn't have any money, you saw the budget, it was, you know, I don't wanna be having to choose between. You know, trail maintenance and police officers, so I want this to be successful, and it seems like this is a. Medium impact thing that we could at least. You know, if it was. If it was ugly and the town didn't like it, it won't be approved again. You'll get one and you'll never have another wedding there. So it's,
Yeah.
and that's already built in. So I'm not saying this is like a final. I think there's a couple things you still got to work out, to think about it a little bit, and it might be nice to get some other input from, you know, this is a town-owned piece of property. It might be people who have really strong feelings about this, but.
And yeah, we did that for the first committee, is that we were in this room right here with, you know, easels and things like that, and it was all around dogs.
Yeah, so dogs,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
well, let's
so-
not go to dogs.
Right, but it was really good to
Yeah,
have the people be able to have their say.
Right.
And there were people that came in that were adamant, one way or the other, and myself and another woman were here. And we listened and we wrote, we had all these easels around and people wrote down all the things, their concerns. And it was really helpful because we really understood where people were coming from. And it helped us make the decision that, you know, ultimately, yes, bikes and dogs and don't mix. And but it was good, and everybody felt like they were heard.
Right.
And I'm feeling that if all of a sudden the neighbors, you know, realize that there's, you know, weddings happening, loud music, all this traffic, and they weren't told, I think you're gonna do more harm than good.
well, you're probably not wrong, but I have to say that because that TEP is approved, they could do that on my street.
True,
Right?
that's.
My
true,
next
you're
door
right.
neighbor
This
could
was-
have 12 events of 250
Yeah.
people and I could not stop them, so.
And the TP requires the abutting neighbors to be notified.
Notified, but they don't get to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
But they can
that
show
is
up at the
correct.
select board and
You
voice.
you probably get
They could
one, like I said,
sure,
you get one bad one and then, you know, the
Yeah.
select
Oh,
board
for
here,
sure.
and you wouldn't get a second one, but.
For sure.
But,
Well, you know. I think I can understand and take your point that you got a rough year ahead of you, you know, trying to get through this. I think to put some framework around this, even if it's more in writing, not, you've done a great job of showing the
Yeah, very good
argument
job.
for why do we
Going through all
need
those
to
documents.
amend the document,
Mhm.
but to put some written framework around what is a wedding in your mind. In COFC's mind.
But so we're talking about celebrations though, right? So
Right.
birthdays,
Yeah.
like we have
Right.
Yeah, you
birthday
can't just
parties
say,
there.
Yeah.
Can't just say.
Right.
Yeah, like a memorial service, you know,
Yeah.
like Jim McCullough dies, you know, like,
I know.
we're gonna say you can't have your service there, like, you know.
But that's his land, I mean, most.
Well,
of
some
it,
of it
yeah.
is, but-
Well, I would like to see some thought. And this doesn't be a ton of time, but thought just around like where this would be allowed to happen and
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
traffic or parking, just a sketch. I don't need a lot of it, but just so we're not. That would just be
Yeah.
interesting.
But you're already hosting events for 300 people, right? I mean,
Right.
that's already,
Yeah,
they
the
were.
party's already defined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that could be your argument for it.
Yeah.
COFC does these
Right,
things.
right.
We
You're
have the
already
team,
doing
it
election.
Do
allows,
big event.
allows and doesn't
Yeah.
allow certain things, and, you know, and that can be the ammunition to sway the vote, you know.
Yeah, I'd have to refresh myself on the TEP before we have another conversation, but, because I think it does.
And the management plan,
Well, it's not the management plan.
right, but what is the principle of the management plan, or like. I don't know if we've revisited that for a while to see what our paragraphs, vision, mission statement is for the management too, or what our goals are with the forest. There's lots of questions.
I mean, the one thing it says it's supposed to be managed for recreation, is like, it's one explicit use, so like the way that it's written. Like, it's intentional to say like, you should be doing recreation on the property, like, that's the way it's currently. I mean,
So I
in
assume
addition,
they mean Being in Viking, not dancing the night away.
Yeah.
But I also think it would could bring a lot of people
It could bring a lot of
onto the property. who might
goodwill
not be
too,
there.
for the benefit of
Right,
it, yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
And, you know, say from the nonprofit's perspective, like, yeah, you know, we lost, I don't know whether I'm comfortable sharing the number, well, sure, we lost, you know. Almost $90,000 last winter,
Mm.
because of lack of ticket sales and lack of rentals. And, you know, for a nonprofit that has a, you know, $400,000 to $500,000 annual budget, that's a huge chunk.
Yeah.
And, you know, the town has an ongoing obligation to actively manage the property according to the land use, to the easements with, Vermont Land Trust. So if the nonprofit just collapsed,
Right.
the town has the obligation to maintain the property, which like now that happens at no cost to the town. If the nonprofit went away, the obligation under the land easement would fall to the town. So the nonprofit is really shouldering a lot of stuff that the town doesn't want to have to be financially responsible for. And, you know, weddings are sort of, they're not gonna solve the fact that winter is not going well, right? But it would just be another kind of brick in the wall of it, you know, and I guess to be honest, like saying that the nonprofit can't do weddings, if that was the board's decision, this group's decision is like, well, you know, you're kind of, you know, we're just trying to make a go of this, you know, and keep the thing, you know, viable, so that the obligation ultimately doesn't fall back to the town, you know? So I guess that's kind of my plea is like, yeah, we're trying to make this thing work, you know, and we don't, you know, the nonprofit certainly doesn't want to, you know, cause harm to the forest. We're all on the same page that it's, you know, it's all for everyone's good. So I guess that's kind of my plea here is like, we're scraping for ways to make this move forward, you know? And if you know, if it was no weddings, it's like, well, geez, you know, like work with us here. You know, we're trying to make this good for everybody.
So I have a question.
I would like to point out that we are at 7 o'clock, and we
Yeah.
have missed
Oh, we have a couple of things.
our
This is
trail, Excel, we have an Excel sheet, something to get to with our events. Or do we have time to keep going with this conversation?
So we should finish it up.
Yes.
I think that from staff perspective, having some goals, if you would like to proceed, we continue to have this conversation. If you would like, as a committee, to see anything from the family center for the next meeting, I think defining that would be important.
And
If you have anything for me as well, that you have questions, that also extend that.
And I'll probably say that from the outdoor family center's perspective, like doing a business plan to make a case for it, like we're probably just not gonna do that. Because to be honest, we just don't have the staff time to execute it. And you know, I you know, we would have to talk it over Hans with staff and such, but I just don't see that as an option. I mean, I understand your point, but I guess whether weddings can be viable without indoor space and stuff, that seems more like the business problem for Catamount to solve. It seems like with this group, it's a matter of defining, you know, is this a good use for the forest?
There's a big part of it missing though, is where it's gonna happen, like that makes a big difference, if you're gonna put up a huge tent right behind the hub. That's gonna really affect, I think, the forest, the people coming to visit the forest and things. And all the people in and out of there, but if it's over at Jim and Lucy's wedding field, I mean, that's out of the way, you know, so we really don't know, you know, where are you gonna be hosting these?
On the celebration event, when everybody came and talked about the outdoor families, there about the CCF acquisition happening and closing. There was a big tent right behind the hub.
There was, but that was pretty small, I was there.
But
It
it-
wasn't like a wedding tent, it was somewhat, but it was not.
No.
Like I was just at Memorial this weekend and we had 250 people. That was a big tent.
Yeah.
And there were ropes everywhere, and I mean, it was,
Wow.
you know, you had to worry about people tripping and. You know, things like that, and there was no.
Okay, so let's have
alcohol
outdoor
there.
center
Yeah, so-
come back with like where. And, you know, if there's.
How people can still access the space.
Right,
But I guess I do wanna point back that, you know, weddings are no different in many regards than, you know, you could have a bike race next week and have a 1,100 square foot tent, you don't even need a TEP. And it could go right behind the hub, so like,
Right.
I don't wanna like start calling out what the
Mm.
possible bad options for weddings are versus what's already permitted and can already
Well,
happen.
that's your argument then, maybe
Yeah.
to put possibly in writing. You know, I'm
Right.
not saying come up with a whole business plan, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pros and cons become. I didn't mean this to be all con, I meant this to be
Yeah.
just questions, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
of which you've answered quite a few of them, It's really, in fact. Not to kind of, well, maybe to contradict you, if I put it behind the hub, I'd want a tent behind the hub, you know, so that's the easiest access to the parking lot.
Oh,
No.
true.
yeah, but I mean, like right now, there's no restrictions on, you know. we have-
Where to put it, yeah.
And I guess I just wanna point out that, you know. Like, we can come up with lots of things that we can do now under a TEP, and, you know, the question is, in what ways? It seems to me like the question for what this committee to consider is, well, Catamount can already do all these events, like. Are there ways that we need to be concerned about how weddings would be different?
Different, right?
Yeah, and like, we can
But not
have
just
tents. we can have
weddings, it's
music.
concerts and.
Right.
Or concerts, yeah,
fairs,
well,
which
yeah,
I
could
feel
be.
like does open a whole lot more
Right,
discussion
But
that we
as
need to have.
as we amend the management plan, if we do, we could say. You know, the easement talks about concerts, fairs and celebrations. Concerts and fairs are not allowed. I mean, just like horses and dogs aren't allowed, right? So we could, this committee. I think would do well to clarify all three of those, whether it's yes or a no. So we
Yeah.
might say no concerts. Yes, celebrations and no fairs, you
I
know,
would just ask that we take all of those. For the same way we're saying about the wedding, what's different about a concert, what's
Yes,
different
yeah,
about?
Right,
yeah,
Right, yeah.
So we want to come up with we're trying to figure out points for you to address for next meeting and coming up with questions for staff. And we can then continue our discussion about concerts, fairs and weddings for. Within ourselves, but what do we need from Outdoor Family Center and staff?
I heard the idea of the location and.
Yeah, location and number, I would really not like to see 500 people. On the town land, I think that's too excessive, I think that we should find some kind of a limit, you know, I mean, I think it's already said, it's, or something, I mean. Yeah, there's 225, right, is a number. Is 300 or 250, or is that a number that? The town, the community would feel good with,
Yeah, I think a cap on the size of it is,
Yeah.
that's totally.
just to keep it manageable.
I like that, I like
Yeah.
that.
Because I
So
was
we
just gonna
need-
think, well, do you have that on races, but races, maybe people come and go, so it's not at the same time. Is that-
Right,
Yeah.
and people are lingering, and so there is a difference between your races and a wedding, because people linger at weddings, I mean. And they're there at night, and you got a tent with ropes, and you can have it all lit up, I mean, so these are things to think about, people are gonna be drinking alcohol. You know, and then who's responsible for somebody who trips over that wire and breaks.
But
it?
Again,
Yeah.
that's the same as any
Yeah.
tent you
Okay.
put up,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Right,
It's-
true,
The
yeah.
question is, what's different about a wedding?
Right,
And, you know.
yeah, it is, I mean, you're there, to me, I mean, I don't go, I avoid.
Yeah.
Catamount when there's an event happening, because I don't wanna deal with all the people,
And with the.
so I don't know what
DEP
that's like, but is it
Yeah.
dark, like, are people meandering around?
So that's our question for next, is
Next
this something we should
Yeah,
put on, like,
So
remember
right.
that we have questions like, what does a nighttime event look like, maybe?
right,
And
Yeah.
maybe you don't do night, like,
Like what?
you'd have to have a lot of lights, like maybe nighttime weddings would be something you'd say
Yeah, it seems.
no
right.
to, it doesn't seem like it would make sense, you know, so
Right.
I think those kind of things.
those are the parameters you can put around when you. saying, come talk to us about your wedding, and it must
Okay.
be in the daylight, you know, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay,
But we also have the question, like, no offense, but if we don't have outdoor family center as a licensing agreement, and we put it into the management plan, we could have. Somebody else who wants to then operate a space there. So we want to, our answer to not be pointed to the outdoor family
No, no,
center,
no,
but
no,
about
no.
Yeah.
weddings in that space.
Right,
I mean, they would still have to have a license with the town, so like that could probably fall under. You know, if outdoor family center went away and there was a new licensee, I don't know how it would work, but like they would have to have their own operating agreement, like.
Right.
So
Start
probably
from
fall under
scratch,
that, yeah.
Could you send the TEP around just so I can find it again?
Yeah, I mean,
oh, no, you didn't
Our
get
committee
enough,
was
guys?
never involved in
The
that.
red line one, I can't remember,
Yeah.
that's 17 times.
So I must say that this committee was never involved in no conversation, no anything about TEPs. And we didn't know what are you talking about? So we don't really even know what a TEP is, so.
You're better off. Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Well, maybe it would help us understand how there's parameters set in place already.
Right.
I can print documents. I will also email you those documents. They can be hard to find on our website. If you'd like one, you can stop by. You had requested
Yes,
some
I did.
as
Thank
a new
you.
member.
Yeah.
Do we have, it looks like we still have town volunteer forestry project update, invasives update, bird nesting update, UVM tree planting update, and other business and town forest events and future events.
So we do need to finish up tonight. Terry, if you want to just take a moment to mention the emerald ash borer treatment, I know you were interested.
So I spent a good 8 months, I was told by Caitlin at Vermont Land Trust about a program, that was through this arbor jet, and they make the machines that treat these, trees that are for the emerald ash borer. And so it was to treat either a very nice, huge tree in town that, is iconic, not ionic. But, or a grove. And so Caitlin immediately thought of Catamount and Big Jim. So we had identified out near the night loop, I guess it is.
Yeah.
11 trees that we really should try to save. We worked it with Ethan Tapper. So we did it the first 2 years ago. Land Trust lent us the machine. We got Ethan Tapper and a whole bunch of other folks to all get together and treat all these trees. And it has to happen every 2 years. So I kept calling this guy and saying, hey, we do have what you're looking for, so finally, after like a good 8 months, he finally said, oh, sure, you qualify, we'd love it. So they're gonna be here, June 25th, and they're gonna start at like 8:30 in the morning. And Chris Dolmer, who's a local arborist, he will be up there with this guy, Kevin from ArborJet, and Laura possibly will be there, I'll be there to help treat these trees, and it's
Awesome.
free, no cost to the town.
Great.
And this is a lot, this is like $2,000.
Wow, that's great.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
So volunteers, so yeah, so hopefully we can keep this little grove,
Yeah,
going, so.
we cut some ash trees down and you see the little buggers in the wood and you
Yeah.
cut it up,
They're here,
June 25th, is that what
June
you're saying?
25th, yeah.
Does
And
that need
is
to go on
that
the calendar?
Calendar?
No, so you've already taken care of that with the outdoor center.
Yeah, so I've been working with Terry and then also have been talking to John and Amanda about it and scheduling it.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But we put it on the calendar, on the Excel sheet still. but-
Yeah.
I thought it was on there.
I'm not sure if I added it or not. We're not closing any trails, we're not
Right.
spraying.
It's not an event
Um,
really, it's just a
so
work
it's-
day, it's just
Yeah,
it's a work day, it's not like,
Okay.
we don't put our bird maintenance on the calendar, so.
Yeah,
This is similar.
that's fine, I was just saying if we're following our processes that we said.
Yeah, all right, yeah. So,
great.
Bird nesting update,
no, I thought we were gonna wrap up, we can postpone
UVM
that.
tree planting update,
yeah,
Well,
Well,
like I said,
town forest events.
we should finish it up for tonight.
Go.
This is the time that we have allocated for.
We
staff.
have put those things on the
Okay,
future
go.
agenda items.
He's on
Motion
overtime.
to-
There's a motion to adjourn.
Staff.
Second,
Oh, are we done?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
We
everyone.
were just trying to finish. Oh, well, yeah, that's okay.
That's all the time we had, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um,
Never get it all done.
No, more than the time we had.
All right.
All right.
Hey, and it didn't even
thanks
rain.
for